The sun sat high above the Kerr family ranch in northern Missouri, a hazy white disk pressing heat into the open yard where more than 60 relatives gathered for our annual reunion. The air carried the smell of grilled corn, smoked ribs, and the dusty sweetness of trampled grass. Country music pulsed from a speaker near the barn, loud enough to vibrate against my chest even from where I sat in my wheelchair under a patch of shade from an old maple tree. Kids ran past me in a blur, squealing as they chased each other around picnic tables and coolers filled with melting ice. It should have felt warm and familiar the way a family gathering ought to feel, but instead, everything inside me tightened the longer I stayed. I knew the way they looked at me. I felt it before I even crossed the yard. The glances that lasted a beat too long. The whispered comments half hidden behind plastic cups. The same look I had grown used to in the past year. The look that said they did not believe a word about my injury. They thought I wanted attention. They thought I wanted pity. They thought I wanted money. I tried to ignore them and keep breathing slowly the way I had coached trauma patients for years, back when I still worked in the emergency room. Slow breath in through the nose, steady breath out through the mouth. I had survived long nights in crowded hallways, alarms shrieking patients fighting for their lives. I had felt blood on my gloves more times than I could count. I had seen horrors strangers never imagined. Yet nothing had prepared me for the quiet violence of being doubted by the people who shared my childhood. My sister Grace appeared beside me without warning, casting a shadow across my legs. She wore a floral dress that swayed in the humid breeze, and her sunglasses hid her eyes, but her mouth had that sharp curl I remembered too well. The curl she wore whenever she thought she was right and everyone else was wrong. "Hey, Amanda," she said softly, sounding almost cheerful. "Everyone is watching. Do not embarrass yourself." I opened my mouth to speak, but the words never formed. Before I could even tighten my hands around the armrests, Grace shoved the side of my wheelchair with sudden force. The metal frame jerked violently. For a split second, my body hung in balance, suspended between upright and disaster. Then gravity seized me. The chair tipped. The world spun. My right hand hit the patio first with a smack that shot sparks up my arm. My shoulder slammed next a wave of heat, exploding through the muscles. Finally, the back of my head grazed the concrete hard enough to make the edges of my vision pulse. I gasped as a lightning bolt shot down my right leg. Nerve damage always felt like that, like a string of tiny detonations beneath the skin, spreading fast and merciless. My fingers curled involuntarily. My breath caught. The pain bloomed bright and hot, swallowing every thought. A hush settled over the yard, so suddenly it felt unnatural. Dozens of eyes locked onto me. For a heartbeat, everything was silent except for the faint hum of the speaker behind the barn. Then someone laughed a short, awkward burst that opened the door for a few more snickers. A little boy pointed at me and giggled, mimicking my fall as if it were a slapstick cartoon. I tried to push myself up, but my right leg twitched once, and then went completely limp. My palms slipped on the warm concrete as I struggled for leverage. My breath grew shallow as embarrassment wrapped around me like a vice. Grace straightened her dress and raised her voice so the entire yard could hear. "Come on, Amanda, stop faking for attention!" People around her murmured in agreement. "I knew it. I saw her stand last month. She walked just fine at the store. She has never been as sick as she claims." My stomach twisted. The words stung more sharply than the fall. My heart pounded against my ribs as I tried again to push myself upright. My arm buckled. My shoulder throbbed like it was full of heat. The back of my neck prickled with humiliation as several relatives lifted their phones and began recording openly now. One woman, someone I had known since childhood, shook her head slowly as if she were watching a con artist get exposed. "This is ridiculous! She is doing it again!" Grace took a deliberate step toward me and tapped the overturned wheelchair with the edge of her sandal, making the metal rattle loudly. "If you can stand at the grocery store, you can stand now." Her voice sliced through the air like a blade. My mouth went dry. I blinked hard, willing myself to move to prove them wrong, to do anything that resembled strength. But my body did not care what my pride wanted. My leg refused to lift. My arms trembled. My back felt like it was locked in place. I heard a man whisper disability money under his breath. Another muttered something about fraud. Someone else scoffed loudly and said I had always liked drama. Heat from the concrete seeped into my cheek as I lay there. All the sounds around me began to warp, stretching into a surreal blur. I remembered what it felt like to be the nurse in control, telling frightened patients that they were safe, that their bodies were stronger than they feared. Now I was the one on the ground, wishing someone would look at me with the same compassion I used to give strangers every night in the ER. But no one moved to help. Not one person. The kids kept running laughing without a clue. Adults stared as if I were an exhibit. Grace folded her arms and tilted her head like she had finally won some twisted game. "Stand up, Amanda. Just stand up." I looked up at the blazing blue sky, breath heaving, body twitching with pain I could not hide. Their laughter rose around me again, louder this time, rolling through the yard like an avalanche, and I lay there on the burning concrete, helpless, humiliated, listening to them judge the broken parts of me they had never tried to understand. The concrete beneath me radiated heat like an open griddle, and for a moment I felt as if my bones themselves were absorbing it. My palms throbbed from the fall, tingling with that familiar electric burn that always followed any sudden impact. I tried to move my fingers and watched them tremble uncontrollably, every nerve firing out of rhythm. The right side of my leg buzzed with a hollow numbness, the kind that made it feel both heavy as stone and impossibly distant at the same time. Neuropathy was a strange creature, unpredictable and cruel. Sometimes it stabbed sharp like glass. Sometimes it faded into an ache deep in the nerves like a bruise beneath skin that no one could see. Today, it was a wildfire of burning lines across my thigh and calf. I swallowed hard and tasted the metallic tang of adrenaline rising through my throat. The sounds around me sharpened and distorted as if the air itself was vibrating too quickly. A cooler lid slammed shut somewhere to my left. A kid squealed with laughter as he darted between knees. Someone opened a beer can with a harsh snap that echoed louder than it should have. All of it blended with the steady pulse of country music from the speaker, the singer's voice almost taunting in its easy warmth. Heat pooled under my cheek as I tried again to lift myself, managing to get halfway up on one elbow before my right arm buckled. Pain exploded through my forearm, not the sharp pain of bone or tendon, but the deep nerve kind that crawled all the way up to my shoulder blade. My breath hitched and I froze, teeth clenched. The world tilted sideways. I could see the grass swaying near the edge of the patio, thin blades shimmering under the sun. Beyond that, rows of relatives stood still watching. Men with plastic cups, women with folded arms, teens holding phones. Their shadows stretched toward me like dark fingers. A few whispered behind their palms. A man cleared his throat in that deliberate way meant to express disapproval without saying so. Another rolled his eyes. One woman shook her head slowly as if she pitied me, but did not believe me. I had been an ER nurse long enough to know body language better than most people. I had watched hundreds of people sit in waiting rooms trying to hide fear or pain or guilt. I knew exactly what I was seeing now. Judgment, skepticism, annoyance. Some even looked tired, like this scene was some inconvenience being replayed for the 100th time. I felt the humiliation coil in my stomach like a fist. My mind flashed back to the day of the accident, the sudden screech of tires, the jolt of the truck's impact slamming into the driver's side of my car, the shattering of glass, the weightlessness right before everything crushed inward, the silence after, broken only by my own ragged breathing when I tried to move my legs and nothing happened. I could still recall the cold terror that wrapped around my spine in that moment. And yet the fear now lying here on the concrete in front of my own blood felt worse. Physical pain has limits. Humiliation does not. I blinked, trying to clear the sweat dripping into my eyes. My right leg twitching reminded me that I did not have the luxury of staying down much longer. The longer I stayed in this position, the higher the risk of the nerve flare spreading upward and locking my muscles. I had seen patients suffer that in the ER. I had held their hands through it, and now I was the one trying not to panic. I sucked in a shaky breath. In the distance, a toddler dropped a plastic toy and began crying. A woman scooped him up without taking her eyes off me. The murmurs intensified. "She can move if she wants to. My cousin saw her walk last month. She is milking this. The words echoed over and over, bouncing around inside my skull. My mother stood several feet away near the folding table covered in food. She wrung her hands so tightly her knuckles looked white. She did not speak. She did not move toward me. She did not defend me. Her silence carved deeper than any words could have. Another wave of pain rolled up my leg. This time it felt like a line of fire was being dragged from my ankle to my hip. I let out a sharp breath, unable to stop it. A woman near the grill raised her eyebrows and whispered something to the man beside her. He smirked. I had treated patients in every kind of condition imaginable. Victims of car wrecks, strokes, gunshots, falls, infections. People who were unconscious, delirious, terrified. I had always kept my voice steady and my hands gentle because that was what they needed. Someone to anchor them. Someone to believe them. It struck me in a painful flash that none of these people had ever believed me. I pushed my palms into the concrete again. Tiny rocks dug into the skin. My elbow wobbled. Sweat trickled down my temple. I could hear someone scoff loudly behind me. "Stand up already." Another voice answered, "Maybe she will if someone cuts off her disability checks." Their laughter rose behind the words. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the familiar creeping numbness creep up my shin. I knew this sensation. I had lived with it every day since the accident. My leg felt swollen even though it was not. My foot felt like it did not belong to me. I willed my toes to move, testing the nerve response. Nothing. A hollow emptiness swept through me. I opened my eyes and the sky above me blurred from the heat. My pulse thudded against my jaw. The humiliation pressed down on my ribs like a weight. But beneath the embarrassment, beneath the shock, something else stirred. Not strength, not courage. Something quieter, something colder. A flicker of clarity. I was not alone in the yard. I was surrounded. But I was also invisible to all of them. And that invisibility told me everything I needed to know. These people would never see my pain unless someone forced them to. Voices swelled around me like a rising tide, each one sharper and more cutting than the last, as if my fall had unlocked a permission everyone had waited months to use. What began as scattered murmurs turned into a chorus of accusations circling above me while I lay sprawled on the concrete, still fighting to catch my breath. Someone near the drink cooler spoke first, a middle-aged uncle whose voice carried easily in open spaces. "I have seen her walk, plain as day. She was at the pharmacy last week, standing, browsing the shelves." His wife chimed in without hesitation, her voice thick with certainty. "Exactly. This is getting ridiculous. She picks when to be disabled." Half the family nodded as if this was a fact they had all quietly known, but finally felt brave enough to say. Another relative stepped closer, a cousin I had not spoken to in over a year, holding a bottle of beer like a microphone. "She is milking disability checks. Everyone knows it. She does not even try to hide it anymore." The words stung like hot needles. I felt my stomach clench. I opened my mouth to speak, to correct them, to explain that disability checks were barely enough to cover a fraction of my medical bills, but the words tangled in my throat. Even if I had spoken, none of them would have listened. A teenager across from me lifted his phone higher and zoomed in. I could see the reflection of my own twisted body on the patio in his screen, the wheelchair overturned beside me like an abandoned prop. He snickered and nudged the girl next to him. She faked it at Christmas, too. She stood up when she thought no one was looking. The video does not lie. I wanted to scream that discomfort tolerance during physical therapy was not the same as being able to walk on command. I wanted to remind them that my nerve damage did not disappear just because they wished it would. But before I could muster the strength to push even one word out, an older cousin cut in. "She is a burden. That is the truth. Her mother has been taking care of her like she is 5 years old. Enough is enough." My mother flinched when she heard it. I saw it, but she did not speak. She just stared at the tablecloth as if studying the pattern printed on it could make her disappear. Her silence hit me harder than any of the accusations. Another voice echoed from behind a folding chair. "I heard she lives rent-free. DoorDash every day. Mom pays for everything." A man near the grill, someone who had once hugged me at my high school graduation, barked out a laugh. "DoorDash and pity checks. Must be nice. People like us have to work for a living." My throat tightened so painfully I could not swallow. They had turned on me so quickly, as if they had all rehearsed this moment, as if my fall had given them a green light to pour out every ugly assumption they had stored away for years. Grace stood near the center of the growing crowd, arms crossed, chin raised like a proud conductor directing an orchestra. She did not even look at me. Instead, she addressed the family like she was presenting a case. You know Amanda, she always loved attention. This wheelchair is the biggest spotlight she has ever had. More murmurs, more nods, more judging eyes. I felt like my skin was being peeled open under their stares. One woman, someone who used to braid my hair when I was little, shook her head slowly. ER nurse suddenly crippled. It does not add up. My chest constricted. Hearing them twist my past felt like being punched from the inside. I had spent years helping people walk again, sit up again, breathe again. And now the people I loved believed I was lying about something as basic as pain. A man stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. He raised his voice. She is living off her mom. That is the truth. Meanwhile, the rest of us bust our backs working double shifts. Why should she skate by? I felt heat rise through my body. Not from the sun, from shame, from rage, from grief. I had always imagined families pulled closer during hardship, that they showed their best selves when someone was at their lowest. But here on this patio, surrounded by the faces of people who shared my blood, I saw only the worst. Grace moved toward me again. Her sandals slapped the concrete with deliberate rhythm. She leaned down close enough that I could smell her perfume, mixed with the sugary alcohol on her breath. You are making a scene, Amanda. Everyone sees what you are doing. I whispered, Please do not. My voice cracked like thin ice. She smirked. Poor Amanda, always needing someone to feel sorry for her. Then she grabbed a fistful of my shirt collar and yanked upward, trying to force me into a sitting position. Pain shot down my spine in a blinding flash. My breath tore from my lungs. I gasped and nearly collapsed again. The crowd erupted with even louder comments. See that? She can move. She is just lazy. She is playing us. Another voice, crueler and louder. She wants money. That is all this is. The noise swarmed around me until I could barely hear my own breath. I could feel the heat of dozens of eyes burning into me. I could feel the sting of betrayal settling deep in my chest, heavy and suffocating. I managed only a whisper barely audible over the chaos. Why are you doing this? Grace shrugged as if the answer were obvious. Because someone has to tell the truth. Around us, the accusations kept coming faster and uglier, like stones being thrown by people who had forgotten they were once capable of kindness. And as I lay there trembling from pain and humiliation, one thought sank into me with brutal clarity. They did not want the truth. They wanted a villain, and today they had chosen me. Voices crashed over me like waves that refused to stop, each one harsher than the last, each one slicing deeper into whatever pride I had left. I lay half-twisted on the hot concrete trying to steady my breathing, but the accusations only grew louder as more relatives stepped forward, eager to add their own version of who they believed I was. Grace stood at the center of it all like she was presenting evidence to a jury. Her sunglasses pushed up on her head now, her eyes sharp with self-righteousness. She reached down, snatched my wallet from the pocket of my fallen wheelchair, and held it up for everyone to see. Look at this. She flipped it open dramatically, waving my disability card like a trophy. There it is, proof that she is living off the government and off her mother. Some people gasped as if she had uncovered a conspiracy. Others nodded like everything finally made sense. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat. Give that back, I whispered, but the words disappeared under the noise swelling around us. Grace ignored me completely. She read aloud the numbers on my disability card with a mocking tone that made my stomach twist. You know what this means. Monthly checks, benefits, special treatment. Meanwhile, the rest of us work real jobs. A man near the food table shouted, Must be nice. Her mother buys everything for her. The whole crowd murmured. A few people clapped. The sound sent a cold shiver down my spine. One of my aunts stepped forward, her voice sharp like she had been waiting years for this moment. And she lied to all of us about physical therapy. She told me she was improving, but that was just another excuse to make us feel sorry for her. Pain sparked through my leg again, forcing my jaw to clench. I wanted to scream that physical therapy was not linear, that nerve damage did not care about hope or hard work, that some days I could stand for 20 seconds and some days I could not even wiggle my toes. But no one wanted the explanation. They wanted justification for their anger. My cousin Melanie crossed her arms tight across her chest. She told me she could not make it to my baby shower because she was in too much pain. Clearly that was a lie. She looked down at me the way someone might look at gum stuck to their shoe. "You are not disabled. You are manipulative." The words struck harder than the fall. A man with a beard like steel wool lifted his phone and pointed it at me as if gathering evidence. "I am recording everything. People need to know what she is doing to her own family." My chest tightened. I had seen family tension before, plenty of it in the ER when relatives exploded under pressure. But this did not feel like pressure. It felt practiced, like a resentment that had been building in private group chats and whispered conversations and shared smirks at holidays. A tall woman near the grill shook her head and spoke loudly enough for the entire yard. "ER nurses deal with trauma every day. You mean to tell me you cannot handle standing for a minute? Nerves do not just stop working because of an accident." I wanted to tell her that yes, sometimes they do. That a crushed vertebra could steal sensation in unpredictable patches. That damage to the spinal cord could cause misfire so severe it felt like electric shocks under the skin. But her mind was already made up. Suddenly, a man shoved his way through the cluster of relatives, one of my uncles, who loved attention more than truth. He held up his phone high, as if broadcasting to an invisible audience. "I caught her standing at the grocery store last month. A toddler could see she is faking it." The crowd erupted. "Finally. Knew it. Thought so." They turned to Grace like she was a hero exposing a long, hidden fraud. She soaked it in her chin, raised her voice confident. "She has been lying for months. I found her lifting a box in Mom's garage last week." A box. It weighed maybe 4 pounds, but to her it must have looked like a confession. I laughed bitterly under my breath, not because any of this was funny, but because the absurdity felt surreal. Grace heard it and snapped her attention back to me. "Are you laughing? You think this is all a joke?" Her voice grew louder, angrier. "Answer me. Do not just lie there and pretend to be helpless." I tried to push myself up, but pain shot through my hip and my right arm shook so violently my elbow nearly collapsed again. My breath hitched and my vision blurred. Grace leaned down her face inches from mine. "The pity party is over. You have drained Mom dry with all your medical bills and excuses. The entire family is tired of carrying you." Her words were gasoline poured on a fire that was already out of control. Another aunt yelled from behind her. "My taxes pay for people like her. People who fake being disabled ruin the system for families who actually need help." The irony nearly choked me. I had spent years working double shifts, skipping meals, lifting patients twice my size, running between rooms until my legs felt like jelly. I had given everything to my job, to my patients, to strangers. And now they stood accusing me of stealing from a system I once supported with every ounce of strength I had. Then the accusation that cut the deepest came from a place I never expected. My mother, Amanda. She said my name softly, almost pleading. "Can you just stop for today?" My heart cracked. Not because she believed them, but because she was begging me to stop being hurt so that the others could stop feeling uncomfortable. I looked up at her through the heat haze, sadness pooling in her eyes, fear carved into the lines around her mouth. She did not defend me. She did not deny their accusations. She did not even step forward to help me stand. She just wanted the conflict to disappear, even if it meant pretending my pain was optional. The accusations kept flying. Fake, fraud, parasite, attention seeker, burden. Each word felt heavier than the last, and as I lay there surrounded by people who shared my blood, listening to them rewrite my life, my body, my pain, I felt something inside me shift. They were not confused. They were not misinformed. They were cruel, and cruelty once spoken aloud never goes back into silence. The air around me thickened as if the heat itself had turned into something alive, something hungry. All it took was one man, one slurred voice emboldened by cheap beer, and the thrill of being part of a crowd to tip the family from accusations into something darker. A tall cousin with sunburned cheeks and a half-empty can of light beer stumbled forward and jabbed his finger in my direction. "Stand up!" His voice cracked through the noise like a breaking branch. One command, one challenge. And suddenly, everything changed. A low rumble of agreement rolled through the group. Heads turned, shoulders straightened, people adjusted their stance as if preparing for a show. Another man shouted, "Stand up if you are really hurt." "Prove it." The comments came faster now, fueled by the kind of group confidence that spreads like fire whenever enough people decide personal cruelty is acceptable, as long as it feels collective. It reminded me of the mob patients I saw during overcrowded ER nights, where fear turned to anger and anger turned to shouting matches. People behaved worse in crowds. They always did. My Aunt Linda, already flushed from 2 wine coolers, clapped her hands together in a rhythm like she was leading a camp song. "Stand up! Stand up!" Her voice rose higher each time, sharp like she was enjoying the attention. The chant took hold almost immediately. "Stand up! Stand up! Stand up!" Dozens of voices, male, female, young, old. The rhythm pulsed through the yard, turning the reunion into something primal and ugly. My heart hammered against my ribcage so hard I felt it in my throat. I pressed my palm into the concrete, trying to brace myself, but my hand shook too badly to support my weight. My right leg twitched uselessly, a painful reminder of everything they refused to believe. Grace did not try to stop the chant. She smiled, that smug, satisfied smile that said she had won. She lifted her beer can slightly like a toast to the spectacle she had created. "Look at her. She is not even trying," she said loudly. "She wants us to feel sorry for her." More laughter. More chanting. The sound merged into something deafening. My skin prickled with humiliation. I had seen mobs turn on strangers before, but never on someone related by blood. Never on someone they used to hug at Christmas. Someone I used to share backyard fire pits with. Someone I had cared for when they were sick. My breath grew tight. A man near the grill shouted over the chant, "If she can walk into a grocery store, she can stand up now. Prove it, Amanda! Prove it!" My cousin Aaron raised his phone like he was capturing footage of a riot. "This is great. Let the truth come out. She is going to expose herself right here." Every part of me trembled. My arms, my neck, my jaw. Humiliation mixed with fear until I felt faint. The chanting only grew louder. "Stand up! Stand up! Stand up!" Then someone went further. A muscular relative I barely knew lifted his chin and yelled, "Someone call the cops! Tell them she is committing fraud!" A few others murmured approval. A woman near the picnic table said, "She has been stealing from the system for years. Turn her in." My mouth went dry. They were so comfortable throwing around words like fraud as if the consequences did not matter, as if they were not about to ruin my life because of rumors and resentment. I had treated patients who feared being reported even when they had done nothing wrong. The terror was real. Now it clawed up my throat, cold and suffocating. Another man stepped closer, the alcohol on his breath drifting toward me. "I will make the call right now if she does not stand up. You hear me, Amanda. This ends today." My vision blurred. Fear grew sharp inside my chest. I pushed my palms harder against the concrete, trying again to sit up, because part of me thought maybe if I tried hard enough, I could make the pain disappear. Maybe I could make them see. But my muscles seized. My leg trembled in violent spasms. I gasped as the burning nerve pain shot upward like a live wire. Someone laughed loudly at the sight of my body jerking involuntarily. "Look, she is putting on a show." That stung worse than anything else, because that was exactly what it looked like. A performance, an act. My body betraying me in the worst possible moment. A teenage girl lifted her phone and whispered gleefully, "This is going straight on social." My stomach twisted so hard I thought I would be sick. My cousin Max shouted, "I bet she has been faking this for sympathy since the start." Another voice echoed, "She loves being the center of attention." People leaned in closer. The circle around me tightened. I could feel the heat of their breath, see the gleam of sweat on foreheads, smell the beer barbecue and cheap perfume. I was no longer a person to them. I was a spectacle, a joke, a problem they wanted solved with force and shame. "Stand up! Stand up! Stand up!" My pulse throbbed in my jaw. Tears burned behind my eyes, hot with humiliation, but I refused to let them fall. I clenched my teeth until my jaw shook. In that moment, I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. Not during the accident, not during months of physical therapy, not even during the nights I lay awake in agony praying the pain would ease for just a moment. This was worse, because pain is one thing, betrayal is another. And as the chanting reached its peak, something inside me fractured. I realized none of them were ever going to stop, not until someone made them. The chanting drilled into my skull until it felt like the air itself was shaking. Each shout of stand-up hit me like a physical blow echoing through my ribs, vibrating against the raw edges of my spine. I tried to take a steady breath, but the noise swallowed everything. My chest tightened as if a heavy weight had settled right on top of it. My arms trembled so violently that I barely recognized them as mine. I could feel the familiar warning signals spreading along my lower back, the ones I had learned to dread during physical therapy when my nerves began firing wildly and my body lost any sense of predictability. My leg twitched again harder this time, the muscles tightening with a painful spasm that shot all the way up to my hip. I sucked in air, sharp and uneven. My fingers curled involuntarily, nails scraping the concrete, but I barely felt them. Instead, I felt the creeping numbness pulling at my calf, the kind that meant the nerve misfires were escalating faster than my body could keep up. I had seen this in patients before years ago while working night shifts in the ER. People who came in broken and terrified, their bodies betraying them in ways they could not understand. I used to hold their hands and tell them they were safe. That help was coming. Now I lay on a patio surrounded by people who wanted me to fail to expose myself to prove their ignorance right. A woman near the grill snapped another photo of me on the ground. My breath caught. I tried again to push myself up, but my right arm gave out completely. My elbow buckled. Pain roared up my forearm and flared across my shoulder like liquid fire. I grimaced and my cheek pressed back against the scorching concrete. Someone laughed at the small noise that escaped me, a sharp sound of delight that sliced through the heat like a knife. Look at that! She cannot even pretend properly. My pulse throbbed behind my eyes. The edges of my vision fuzzed. I felt sweat trickle down my spine, gathering at my waistband. For a moment, I thought I might pass out. My head felt too light, my breaths too shallow. The sun felt like it was burning through my skin. Someone shouted from behind me, "Hey, Amanda, do you want us to help you up, or would that ruin your performance?" The comment sparked another round of mean-spirited laughter. I closed my eyes for a moment, and images from the accident flashed behind my eyelids. The screeching tires, the sudden slam of metal meeting metal, the sensation of my body being flung sideways, the instant, horrifying realization that my legs were not responding. I had woken up in the hospital terrified but hopeful. Doctors promised physical therapy might bring some mobility back. Maybe months, maybe years, maybe never. None of them guaranteed anything. But I had fought. I had sweated through therapy sessions that made me cry. I had pushed my body until the room spun, until my breath shook, until I felt like I would collapse. And now here I was surrounded by people who had never even asked what recovery looked like, who had never bothered to learn the difference between damaged nerves and working ones, who looked at me and saw laziness instead of survival. A new wave of murmurs rippled across the crowd. Someone shouted, "If she does not stand, we call the police." A ripple of agreement followed. "Yeah, call them. She has been taking advantage of everyone for months." That did it. Fear slammed into me so suddenly I nearly choked on it. I had seen what false accusations of fraud could do. I had seen patients lose benefits treatment housing hope. It was more than humiliation now. It was a threat to my entire future. I tried again to rise, but my arms were shaking uncontrollably. My vision blurred as if I were underwater. I could feel my body slipping into panic, the fight or flight response tightening every muscle even as they failed me. I sucked in a sharp breath through clenched teeth. The crowd blurred for a moment into colors and shapes. My heart pounded against my ribs so violently I felt it in my throat. Amanda! A voice inside me whispered my own name, the voice I used to hear during long shifts, the one that reminded me to stay grounded. But the noise drowned it out. The chanting went on, relentless and cruel. Stand up, stand up, stand up. My chest squeezed painfully. My pulse hammered against my temples. The humiliation seeped into every inch of my skin like poison. I felt myself spiraling, sinking deeper into a place where shame mixed with fear until I could not tell where one ended and the other began. For one horrifying moment, I understood why some patients dissociated when the pain became overwhelming. I felt myself drifting my mind, pulling away from my body like it was trying to save itself. I could hear Grace's voice cutting through the chanting. This is pathetic. Look at her. She wants attention so badly she will throw herself on the ground. Something inside me cracked, then a quiet, painful break I could almost feel physically. Not a bone, not a nerve. Something deeper. Something emotional that had been stretched too thin and finally snapped. I opened my eyes again and everything felt sharper. The heat, the noise, the pain, the betrayal. I saw their faces clearly, every mocking smirk, every narrowed eye, every gleeful expression. I saw my mother still staring at the table, shoulders drawn tight, too afraid to choose a side. I saw Grace glowing with self-righteous satisfaction. And in that moment, a cold realization settled over me. They would never stop. Not on their own. Not because of decency. Not because of guilt. Not because of conscience. Someone would have to intervene. Someone who understood what real injury looked like. Someone who could silence them. And as the spasms in my leg intensified and my breaths came quicker, I felt a flicker of something like hope, faint, but growing. Because behind the crowd barely visible through shifting bodies, someone else had arrived. Someone who stood still while everyone else moved. Someone whose presence alone changed the air. But for now, all I could do was lie there on the burning concrete trapped in my failing body while the mob pushed me closer to collapse. The chanting had reached a fever pitch, rolling over me in waves that made the world tilt and warp. Stand up! Stand up! Stand up! Each shout pressed harder against my chest until my breaths turned thin and ragged, my pulse vibrating along my jawline. My vision blurred, my hip throbbed, my right leg twitched uncontrollably, muscles firing in wrong directions like sparks from a frayed wire. I gripped the concrete, trying not to slip into the full panic attack, clawing up my throat. Then abruptly, everything cracked open. A single voice cut through the noise. That is enough. The chanting stumbled to a halt as if someone had yanked a cord from the speakers. People turned. Heads shifted. A hush rippled outward like the air before a storm. That is enough. You are assaulting my patient. The crowd parted slightly, and that was when I saw him. Dr. Samuel Brooks stood at the edge of the patio, holding a can of unsweetened iced tea in one hand and a leather medical folder in the other. He was calm, almost unnervingly calm, as if walking into a mob of my furious relatives was no more alarming than walking into a waiting room on a Monday morning. His dark gray polo was neatly pressed, his posture straight, his expression unreadable except for a controlled disappointment that instantly made several people lower their phones. Grace froze. For the first time all afternoon, she looked unsure. I blinked hard. My pulse slowed just enough that the world stopped tipping sideways. Dr. Brooks took a slow, measured step forward, then another. He walked with the kind of grounded presence only someone who had spent decades delivering devastating news could carry. He stopped beside me, handed his iced tea to a stunned cousin without breaking eye contact, then crouched down with precise professional movements. "Amanda, do not move yet." His voice was low and steady, the voice he used when delivering instructions to frightened patients. I exhaled shakily, the world pulling back into focus as his hand hovered near my shoulder, assessing before touching. "Can you breathe?" he asked quietly. I nodded, barely. Pain level 8, maybe 9. My voice cracked. His jaw tightened. He swept his gaze across my body quickly but thoroughly, noting my posture, my leg spasms, the abrasion on my palm, the way my hip was angled. Then he lifted his head and looked directly at Grace, who instantly shifted back a step as though heat had struck her. "What exactly do you think you are doing?" His tone was controlled but sharp enough to cut through every whisper. Grace opened her mouth, floundering. She is fine. She is not disabled. She is lying to everyone." Dr. Brooks stood upright slowly, still towering in front of me, blocking part of the sun. Several relatives stepped back as if they had suddenly realized they were much closer to him than they wanted to be. He folded his arms lightly, his expression cool and clinical. "You are accusing a woman with documented spinal trauma of lying while she is lying on the ground unable to move. Is that correct?" The silence deepened. Even the kids stopped running. Grace lifted her chin again. "She can stand at the store. She can stand when she wants to, and she has been draining our mother dry." Dr. Brooks blinked once slowly, like he had just been presented with the most idiotic statement he had heard in 27 years of practicing neurology. Then he pulled a thin, dark tablet from his medical folder and turned it on. The screen lit up with a medical portal I recognized instantly. He tapped once. A detailed spinal image filled the screen vertebrae, highlighted with surgical notes. "This is Amanda's lumbar spine." He angled the tablet so everyone could see. "If any of you are capable of basic reading comprehension, you will notice the surgical fusion at L3 and L4. 4 titanium rods, 12 screws. 0 capacity for weight bearing without pain spikes and instability." Several relatives leaned back instinctively, like the image itself was too jarring to process. Dr. Brooks swiped to the next scan. "This is her nerve conduction study. The damaged areas are marked in red. These nerves no longer fire correctly. They misfire, they collapse. They cause uncontrolled spasms." He gestured toward my trembling leg. "Exactly like that." Whispering spread in a new pattern, now sharp and nervous. Grace swallowed hard. "That does not prove she cannot walk." Dr. Brooks turned to her fully. His eyes narrowed with the cold precision of someone about to dismantle an argument molecule by molecule. "She can stand for under 30 seconds during supervised physical therapy with braces and support bars. 30 seconds, under supervision, not during a hostile family ambush, not when shoved from a wheelchair, not when forced to prove her existence for your entertainment." The last word landed like a stone dropped in water. Someone muttered an apology under their breath. Another lowered their phone completely. Dr. Brooks turned his attention back to me, briefly kneeling again. "Do not move, Amanda. Your leg is in spasm and your hip is misaligned." I nodded my breath, shaky but steadying. He rose again, his expression harder now. He addressed the entire crowd, his voice ringing across the yard with controlled authority. "What I have witnessed today is assault on a disabled person, a felony in the state of Missouri." Several relatives flinched. Grace's face drained of color, and he was not finished. He reached into his pocket and lifted his phone slightly. I began recording the moment I heard yelling from the driveway. I have footage of the shove, the fall, the chance, the harassment. Every second of it is saved to an encrypted cloud. A startled ripple moved through the crowd. A woman gasped. A man cursed under his breath. Grace stepped forward, shaking. "You cannot be serious." He raised an eyebrow. "I am a neurologist. I do not joke about spine injuries." Dr. Brooks took a slow step closer to her. "You pushed a medically fragile woman out of her wheelchair. Then you led a chant encouraging more harm. That is not a misunderstanding. That is criminal." Grace's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother finally moved, stepping closer, tears forming in her eyes. Dr. Brooks did not soften. He looked at the rest of the family, voice unwavering. Unless someone calls an ambulance in the next 30 seconds, I will. No one moved at first. They stared, frozen, exposed, guilty, and for the first time that day, I felt something other than pain or humiliation. I felt the ground shift. I felt the balance of power change. Someone behind me whispered shakily, "I will call," and the mob finally began to break apart. The moment someone finally said they would call the ambulance, the crowd fractured like cracked glass. People stepped back, stumbling over lawn chairs and cooler lids as if they had just awakened from a fever. A few tried to slip behind the barn, pretending they had never stood chanting over me just minutes earlier. The sun beat down harder, reflecting off the glossy tablet in Dr. Brooks's hand as he stepped fully into the center of the circle. His presence alone shifted the energy. The same people who had confidently mocked me now shrank into themselves, adjusting their shirts, smoothing their hair, tucking their phones away as though tidying their appearance could erase what they had done. Dr. Brooks did not give them time to breathe. He tapped his screen and expanded a set of diagnostic images. I recognized them instantly. My spine. The proof they had all demanded without ever having the courage to ask me directly. He lifted the tablet high enough for even the people lingering near the grill to see. "This is Amanda's MRI from 9 months post-accident. If you look closely, you will see severe nerve impingement along the right side." He zoomed in with 2 fingers until the image became an intricate map of damage. These areas in white indicate scar tissue. The darker areas represent significant nerve loss. Several older relatives squinted. One of the teenagers flinched. Someone whispered a low, "Oh, no." Dr. Brooks continued, his tone clinical, but with a razor-sharp edge. "Here is the axial view. This bright region at the L3 level is edema. Inflammation. Ongoing. Painful. Every step sends electric spikes through her leg." He swiped to another scan, this one from 6 months earlier, and this is her nerve conduction velocity study. These dips in amplitude indicate disrupted nerve pathways. She cannot control these spasms. They are involuntary. They are painful. They are permanent. He pointed to my trembling leg. "You have all witnessed the spasms this afternoon. They are the direct result of the damage shown here." Grace let out a small sound, almost a gasp, and clutched her elbow. She looked around but found no support. Even the relatives who had been the loudest earlier now stared at the ground like children caught stealing. Dr. Brooks continued flipping through images, each one more damning for the people gathered around us. "This is from the emergency surgery she underwent. The titanium rods are visible here, inserted to stabilize damaged vertebrae. Without them, she would be paralyzed from the waist down." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Grace's face went pale, drained of all the self-righteous confidence she had worn earlier. My mother covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes glossy with shock and guilt. My uncle, who had been recording earlier, lowered his phone in shame. Dr. Brooks turned slowly in a full circle, ensuring every person present looked directly at the medical evidence. "Each of you has made serious accusations today. Fraud, deception, manipulation." He paused, letting the words hang heavy in the thick, humid air. "Every single accusation was false, and every one of you made them without even attempting to understand her condition." The silence felt like gravity pulling everyone downward. The only sound was the buzzing of a cicada in the oak tree nearby, its frantic rhythm contrasting sharply with the frozen stillness around us. Grace tried to speak. She cleared her throat voice thin. But she stood at a store. Someone saw her. Dr. Brooks did not even blink. She can stand for brief periods under controlled therapeutic conditions. That does not mean she can walk. That does not mean she is healed. That does not mean she is lying. He turned the tablet around and tapped a video file. The screen glowed, displaying a familiar image. Me, sitting in my wheelchair outside the barn. Just 30 minutes earlier. I saw the timestamp stamped across the corner. The moment he had arrived, he had recorded everything. The shove, the fall, my body hitting the concrete, my legs spasming uncontrollably, their voices chanting, "Stand up!" The insults, the laughter, the accusations. He let the video run for 15 unbearable seconds. The sound of Grace yelling, "Stop faking for attention," echoed across the yard from the tablet's speakers like a haunting replay. People shifted uncomfortably, their faces contorting as they heard themselves. Dr. Brooks stopped the video abruptly. "I have the entire incident documented. It is stored in an encrypted medical file and backed up to multiple cloud locations." The irony was suffocating. They had accused me of faking, and now their own cruelty was preserved permanently sharper than any confession. A relative near the drink cooler swallowed hard and whispered, "Oh my God." Another covered her face with both hands. My uncle, the one who had proudly declared he was recording for evidence earlier, took a step back until he bumped into a folding chair. Brooks held the tablet steady, his voice firm. "This is assault on a disabled woman. This is harassment. This is group intimidation. This is humiliation targeted at someone medically vulnerable." He paused and scanned the crowd, his gaze unwavering. "And every one of you participated." Grace squeezed her eyes shut. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the children stayed quiet, sensing something grave in the air. Dr. Brooks tucked the tablet under his arm and stepped closer to me. He knelt again this time, placing a steady hand near my shoulder. "Amanda, focus on my voice. We are going to stabilize your leg and get you safely into the ambulance." I nodded weakly, tears burning behind my eyes. Not tears of pain this time. Tears of relief. Someone finally saw me. Someone finally believed me. Dr. Brooks straightened and addressed the family one last time. "The paramedics will arrive in under 5 minutes. You will step aside when they do. You will not interfere. And if anyone attempts to hide or delete footage from today, understand that I already have everything I need." His voice hardened into something unmistakable. "For the police." Grace whimpered softly. Several relatives looked away entirely. The truth had finally been forced into the light, and once exposed, it could never be put back. The yard felt eerily different now, as if the air itself had shifted from blistering heat to something heavy and suffocating. Moments ago, the crowd had moved like a single creature, loud and confident, feeding on each other's cruelty. Now they stood scattered, stunned into stillness, their shoulders hunched, their eyes darting anywhere except toward me or Dr. Brooks. The chant that had once shaken the ground beneath me had vanished, swallowed by the crushing weight of what they had just seen. Even the cicadas seemed quieter. Grace looked trapped in her own body, arms crossed tightly, fingers digging into her elbows as if trying to hold herself together. She opened her mouth twice, searching for something to say, but only a small, broken sound came out. Her earlier bravado had evaporated. All that remained was pale shock and rising fear. My mother stood motionless, one hand clasped over her mouth, tears filling the corners of her eyes. She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time in years. Not the daughter she thought was exaggerating or avoiding responsibility, but someone bruised, hurting, humiliated beyond measure. Her lips trembled, though she still did not step forward. Dr. Brooks remained beside me, steady and calm, his presence anchoring me as another tremor ran up my right leg. He gently placed his hand near my knee without touching it, watching the involuntary movement with concern. "Try to breathe slowly, Amanda." I followed the sound of his voice, letting each breath glide in and out, even though the shame rising inside me felt thick and choking. Some relatives shifted nervously, their shoes scraping the patio. One woman whispered, almost trembling, "I did not know." Dr. Brooks heard her and turned sharply. "You did not ask." His reply cut through the crowd like a blade. Several people recoiled. A man near the cooler tried to step backward, stumbling into a chair. His earlier smirk was gone, replaced with something tight and panicked. The same man who had recorded me with enthusiasm now looked like he wanted to disappear. Dr. Brooks addressed him directly. "You were very confident earlier. Quite bold. Would you like to explain to Amanda why you were filming her suffering instead of helping?" The man's face flushed deep red. He looked away. "I just thought, I did not realize." Dr. Brooks raised an eyebrow. "No, you did not care to realize." The man swallowed and lowered his gaze. A group of teens huddled near the barn, clutching their phones like evidence of their own guilt. One girl wiped her face quickly with the back of her hand, embarrassed that she had been caught laughing on video. She whispered to her friend, "Why did we even do that?" Her friend shrugged helplessly, shoulders shaking. "I do not know. It happened so fast." The confession spread through the yard like a quiet ripple, people shaking their heads, people covering their mouths, people unable to look at me. But it was too late for remorse to fix anything. Grace finally spoke, her voice thin and cracked. "I did not mean to hurt her." Dr. Brooks turned to her slowly, his expression unreadable. "Intent does not erase impact. You pushed a medically fragile woman. You physically endangered her. You publicly humiliated her." Grace's eyes filled with tears. She seemed too shocked to wipe away. "I just thought, you have all seen her stand. I thought she was lying." Dr. Brooks's voice hardened. "You thought wrong because you preferred judgment over understanding. And now you must live with that choice." Grace flinched as if he had struck her. Behind her, my Aunt Linda wrapped her arms around herself, swaying, slightly ashamed of the chant she had led. She whispered, "I did not know she had surgery. I did not know about the rods." Dr. Brooks shook his head. "It was never your place to know every medical detail, but it was absolutely your responsibility not to accuse her of lying without evidence." My cousin Aaron looked pale, his earlier arrogance replaced by something closer to nausea. He stuttered, "Amanda, I swear I thought you were fine. You always looked okay." My throat tightened. I wanted to answer, but the words stuck. Because I had tried so hard to look okay. I had forced myself to smile through pain, to appear strong, to attend holidays, even when my body felt like it was tearing itself apart. And now that very strength had been weaponized against me. Dr. Brooks seemed to read the thought on my face. He spoke softly but loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Disabilities are not always visible. Pain is not always visible. Nerve damage is not always visible." He looked around, his voice sharpening. "But cruelty always is." A suffocating silence settled over the yard. A few relatives stepped away entirely, retreating toward the barn, as if ashamed to even occupy the same space as their earlier behavior. Others looked at me with new eyes, eyes filled with guilt and regret that felt too little too late. A woman near the picnic tables whispered, "I cannot believe we did that." Her husband tugged her arm, muttering, "We just followed everyone else." Dr. Brooks turned his head, fixing him with a cold stare. "Mob mentality is not an excuse. A crime committed by many is still a crime." The man stiffened, looking away like a scolded child. Grace finally bent down slightly, her voice trembling. "Amanda, I am sorry. I did not know. I truly thought—" I could not listen to her finish. The apology sounded thin, hollow, a desperate attempt to patch over something shattered beyond repair. My breath shook, not from pain this time, but from the realization that her apology came not from empathy, but from fear. Fear of consequences. Fear of exposure. Fear of losing control of the narrative she had crafted so confidently. Dr. Brooks stepped forward, his tone unyielding. "Save your apology for the police." Grace's knees buckled slightly. Several relatives gasped. My mother finally moved. She stumbled toward me, tears now rolling freely down her cheeks. "Amanda, sweetheart, I did not know." Her voice cracked with guilt. "I should have believed you. I should have protected you." My eyes burned. For a moment I wanted to lean into her touch as she reached for my shoulder. But a sharp pain shot down my leg and I winced. Dr. Brooks raised his hand. "Do not touch her. She may have a ligament tear or a vertebral bruise." My mother froze mid-motion, covering her mouth again, shaking. The sound of sirens began faintly in the distance, growing louder, winding along the country road that led to the ranch. The entire family stiffened. For the first time since the accident, I felt something close to vindication. Not victory, not triumph. Something quieter, something steadier. The truth had finally been dragged into the open, and every person who had doubted, mocked, and tormented me now had to stand in the harsh light of their own behavior. The sirens grew louder, winding through the long gravel driveway that led up to the ranch, and the entire yard seemed to seize in place. People looked toward the sound with dread, their postures stiffening as the red and blue lights flickered against the barn walls. Moments ago, they had hovered over me like a pack of circling predators. Now they stood frozen exposed in the unforgiving sunlight. The ambulance turned the final corner and rolled to a stop near the edge of the patio. The paramedics stepped out with the kind of fast-focused efficiency that sent a rush of familiarity through me. For a moment, I felt like I was back in my old ER watching colleagues spring into action. Except this time, I was on the ground, not standing beside them. The first paramedic, a woman with her hair pulled into a tight bun, crouched near me without hesitation. "Hi, Amanda. I am Carla. We are going to take good care of you. Can you tell me what hurts most right now?" I swallowed hard and tried to steady my breathing. My hip, my leg is spasming, and my lower back feels like it is locking up. She nodded calmly and signaled to her partner. "Backboard and straps. We need to minimize movement." The second paramedic jogged back to the truck. Carla looked up briefly at Dr. Brooks. "You were the caller." Dr. Brooks gave a curt nod. "Neurologist. I witnessed the fall and the subsequent nerve collapse. She needs imaging and pain management." Carla's eyebrows rose slightly. "Understood." Grace lurked several feet away, trembling, her hands twisting at her sides. She looked like she wanted to intervene, to interrupt, to insert herself back into control. But every time she took a half step forward, someone else flinched as if to block her path, even people who had sided with her earlier. Carla leaned closer to me. "Amanda, can you take a slow breath? On your exhale, I am going to palpate near your hip." I nodded and braced. She pressed gently, and pain shot through me so sharply I choked on a gasp. Carla's tone shifted instantly. "Okay, there is guarding and instability. Do not move. We will support everything." The second paramedic returned with the backboard, placing it carefully beside me. Together, they rolled me using a synchronized count, supporting my neck and shoulders, while sliding the board beneath my spine. The world tilted for a moment, the sky blurring with faces above me. I bit down on a cry as another spasm tore through my leg. Carla strapped me in, quickly tightening the belts enough to stabilize but not worsen the pain. Carla glanced up at Dr. Brooks once more. "Any contraindications to fentanyl or ketorolac?" Dr. Brooks answered immediately. "No allergies on file. Avoid heavy dosing. She has hypersensitive nerve response." Carla nodded and injected a low dose of pain medication into my IV line once it was placed. Warmth flooded my veins, softening the sharp edges of agony but not erasing it. The paramedics lifted the board and carried me toward the ambulance. The crowd parted silently, some stepping aside so quickly it was as if my presence burned. Grace stood directly in the path for a fraction of a second, eyes wide and watery before my mother yanked her back by the arm. "Not now, Grace." Her voice cracked under the weight of shame and fear. The doors of the ambulance opened, the cool air washing over me like a brief mercy. The paramedics slid me inside, securing the board and attaching monitors. Carla clipped a pulse oximeter to my finger, tightened a blood pressure cuff around my arm, and secured the EKG lead to my chest. "Your heart rate is elevated, but that is normal given the circumstances. You are safe now." The words hit me harder than the pain medication. Safe. After everything that had happened, the reassurance felt surreal. Dr. Brooks climbed into the front cabin to ride along, speaking briefly to the driver. Grace tried to step forward, but a paramedic blocked her with a raised hand. "Family cannot ride unless cleared by the attending physician. She is being transported for spinal trauma." Grace's throat bobbed. "I just want to—" "Please." The paramedic's voice stayed firm. "Not now." The doors closed on her unfinished sentence. The engine rumbled and the ambulance pulled away from the ranch, the tires crunching over dirt and gravel as the humiliating scene shrank behind us. Carla adjusted my IV and monitored my vitals. "You are doing great. Just keep breathing slowly." My body trembled under the straps, the lingering spasms still tugging at my muscles. Dr. Brooks turned in his seat and looked toward me through the small window connecting the compartments. "Amanda, once we arrive, you will go straight to triage. I will speak to the attending physician. You are not alone in this." The reassurance steadied me in a way I had not expected. The hospital came into view 10 minutes later, a familiar building with brick walls and automatic doors I had passed through countless times when I worked as a nurse. Now I was entering it as a patient, again vulnerable and exposed. The ambulance pulled into the bay. The back doors opened. The ER lights felt blinding as they wheeled me down the hall, voices echoing around me. Room 6. Trauma evaluation. Full spinal imaging. Blood draw. Vitals. Ortho consult. Carla handed off the report to the triage nurse. Mechanism of injury is a push from a wheelchair resulting in fall to concrete. Observed spasms, probable ligament involvement, possible vertebral bruise. The triage nurse nodded and leaned over me. Amanda, we are going to take care of you. Just breathe. I stared at the ceiling tiles, so familiar yet distant, each one spinning slightly as adrenaline drained from my system. Another nurse placed warm blankets over me. A technician wheeled in a portable X-ray machine. Dr. Brooks appeared at my side, speaking quietly to the attending physician. She needs immediate imaging. Nerve flare has been consistent for over 30 minutes. Rule out vertebral fracture. They spoke in a language I knew well, but could no longer participate in. The X-ray plates slid beneath my back, cold and rigid. The machine buzzed, the lights flickered. Every movement sent a jolt down my spine. The attending physician returned with the images in hand. You have a ligament strain along your lumbar region, and there is evidence of bruising near the vertebrae. No new fractures, but this is absolutely consistent with trauma. Dr. Brooks nodded once his jaw tight. Then the attending physician turned to me. And the police are outside. They would like to speak with you when you are ready. My breath caught. Not in fear this time. In something closer to relief. Something closer to justice beginning its slow crawl toward the surface. The curtain had barely been pulled halfway across the doorway when the officer stepped inside his uniform crisp, his expression steady and deliberately neutral. He removed his hat as a gesture of respect, holding it against his side as he approached the bed where I lay strapped to the monitoring equipment. The overhead lights cast a cold glow on the metal rails, the IV line, and the scattered medical supplies that still surrounded me like a battlefield aftermath. He paused a foot from the bed. Amanda Kerr, I am Officer Daniel Rourke with the Boone County Sheriff's Department. I am here to take your statement about what happened at the reunion this afternoon. I drew a shaky breath, feeling the tight pull of the brace around my torso. Dr. Brooks moved closer, positioning himself slightly behind the officer in a quiet show of protection. The officer's voice remained professional, but softened around the edges when he saw the tremor in my hands. Before we begin, I want to confirm that you feel able to speak. If you need a moment or want to stop at any time, you tell me. I nodded, the motion stiff but certain. I can talk. The officer clicked on a small body cam mounted to his chest, its blue light blinking alive. Standard protocol. For your safety and mine, this conversation will be recorded. Do you understand and consent? I do. He positioned his notebook but did not look down yet. His attention stayed on my face. Can you tell me what led to the fall today? My throat tightened. I could hear the chant echoing in my memory, the laughter, the hot slap of humiliation more painful than the concrete. My sister pushed my wheelchair. She did it intentionally. She said I was faking for attention. Officer Rourke nodded slowly, not reacting emotionally, but his jaw flexed. Did you feel threatened before she pushed you? Grace had been whispering to relatives all afternoon, pointing at my chair, saying I could walk. Then she came over, knelt beside me, smiled like she was posing for a picture, and shoved. My voice trembled. She shoved hard, hard enough that I could not catch myself. Dr. Brooks stepped forward. I witnessed the entire thing. It was deliberate force against a disabled person. There was no stumble, no accident. She pushed her with both hands and then verbally taunted her afterward. Officer Rourke glanced at him. And you are. Neurologist, treating physician, and I have video footage. That made the officer pause. May I see it? Dr. Brooks handed over his iPad. The officer watched silently as Grace's voice filled the small room, sharp and cruel through the speakers. Stop faking for attention. The sound of me hitting the concrete rang out, followed by a collective gasp, laughter murmurs, the chanting, the accusations, the tone of a crowd turning predatory. Officer Rourke exhaled a long, controlled breath as the video ended. That is more than enough to establish probable cause. He turned back to me. Amanda, Missouri statute defines assault against a disabled person as aggravated assault. That carries felony charges. I swallowed hard, even though she is my sister. His expression softened, but his voice stayed firm. Especially because she is your sister. The law does not make exceptions for family. In fact, it takes it even more seriously. He flipped his notebook open, pen ready. I need to ask a few more questions for the official report. Did your sister know about your disability and medical limitations? Yes, she knew everything. I told her countless times. She attended therapy appointments before we stopped speaking. She knew what my body could and could not do. Did she ever physically threaten you before? Not like this. She mocked me, called me dramatic, said I exaggerated. But she never put her hands on me like she did today. Did any other family members participate in the event? My voice faltered. Some chanted for me to stand, some recorded, some accused me of fraud. But Grace is the only one who physically attacked me. Thank you. His pen scratched across the paper, capturing every detail. After a moment, he looked up. Based on the evidence, we will be issuing a warrant for your sister's arrest tonight. The prosecutor's office will be notified immediately. She will likely be taken into custody within hours. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. It felt strangely heavy, carrying grief, shock, vindication, and something like sorrow all tangled together. Officer Rourke continued. Once she is processed, you will receive a case number. You may be contacted to provide additional testimony. You will not be required to face her unless it is in a courtroom with full legal protection. Dr. Brooks moved closer to the foot of my bed. Amanda will not be alone for any of that. Officer Rourke nodded respectfully. I can see that. He glanced toward the hallway. One more thing. Several witnesses approached me outside. They corroborate your account. Some even apologized for not stepping in sooner. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. And some of them are already experiencing deep regret for what happened. I closed my eyes for a moment. Regret did not undo damage, but at least it meant accountability was beginning. The officer looked at me one final time. You showed a lot of courage today. You should never have had to. I am sorry this happened to you. I am sorry your family failed you. My voice cracked. Thank you for believing me. He placed his hat back on his head. Believing you was the easiest part. The law will handle the rest. With that, he stepped out of the room, leaving the curtain swaying behind him. A strange stillness settled in. The monitors beeped softly. The fluorescent lights hummed. Dr. Brooks rested a hand on the foot of the bed, steady and grounding. Amanda, this is the beginning. Justice takes time, but it is moving now. I let my head sink back against the pillow, tears slipping silently across my temples. This time, they were not from pain. This time, they were from finally being heard. 6 months is enough time for a life to unravel, enough time for the truth to stretch itself across every corner of a town that once refused to see it. 6 months after the reunion, the world looked completely different, both outside and inside me, though neither change came easily. The felony charge against Grace moved through the system at a steady, unrelenting pace. The prosecutor filed formal counts of aggravated assault on a disabled person backed by the video medical reports and the testimony of witnesses who later admitted under oath that they had stayed silent during the incident because they did not want drama. Grace was arrested at her apartment the night the warrant was issued. I did not see it, but I heard the details from the officer who followed up with me the next day. She did not fight. She cried. She begged the officers to let her explain. She told them it was a misunderstanding, but the video and the witnesses erased the word misunderstanding before she even said it. She lost her job at the nursing home within 48 hours. The facility issued a public statement saying they could not employ someone facing felony charges involving the mistreatment of a disabled person. The comment section beneath their statement filled with hundreds of angry posts demanding her permanent ban from the healthcare field. Within a week, her boyfriend broke up with her. Within a month, her landlord posted an eviction notice on her door because she had fallen behind on rent. When she finally called our mother for help, my mother hesitated before telling me about it, her voice cracking down the middle like she was afraid the truth itself might cut her. She is living in her car, Amanda. She has nowhere to go. I stared at the wall for a long time after that call. I did not feel triumph or satisfaction, just a hollow ache as if someone had carved out a piece of me the day Grace pushed me and left an empty space behind. My own life was not simple either. Recovery came in slow, punishing increments. The bruised vertebrae took weeks to stabilize. The ligament strain in my lower back made sitting upright painful for more than 15 minutes at a time. My physical therapist increased my nerve stimulation sessions from once a week to twice a week. The spasms in my thigh and calf became more unpredictable, sometimes knocking me sideways even in my wheelchair. Nights were the worst. The word "stand up" echoed in my dreams, sometimes whispered, sometimes shouted, sometimes chanted, by a faceless crowd of people with my family's voices. I woke gasping more nights than I cared to admit. Dr. Brooks recommended a trauma counselor who specialized in medical PTSD, and I found myself sitting in her office every Tuesday morning, gripping tissues while she tried to help me untangle the damage of a betrayal that went far deeper than a physical push. "You were trained to run toward pain," she told me once. "As a nurse, you learned to help strangers, but no one trained you for being abandoned by the people meant to protect you." Therapy helped, but the emotional work was grueling. I cried more in those 6 months than I had in the year following my accident. Meanwhile, the ripple effects of the reunion spread through the family like a slow-moving infection. Several relatives deleted their social media accounts after the video circulated. A few tried to reach out to me with messages that were thinly disguised attempts to clear their own names. I did not respond. Not yet. The only messages I allowed myself to read more than once were the ones from people I did not know. Hundreds of strangers who had seen the news story wrote to me. Some were disabled. Some were caregivers. Some were parents of children whose families refused to believe their diagnoses. Their words carried a gentleness I had not felt in years. "Thank you for standing up for yourself. Thank you for speaking out. Thank you for showing us we are not alone." I kept those messages in a folder. On bad nights, I opened them and let their quiet understanding wash over me. My mother visited often in those months, sitting beside me in my small apartment, as if she were afraid to leave me alone even for a moment. She apologized for not stepping in sooner. She cried every time she remembered how she had stood frozen that day watching her daughters unravel in front of 50 people. I forgave her, not because she earned it, but because she needed it, and because holding that bitterness in my body only made the pain worse. Grace did not contact me directly, not at first. Instead, she left long voicemails for our mother, who would listen with trembling hands and then delete them before she could stop herself. "She is sorry, Amanda. She is sorry every day." Sorry did not change the fact that I still woke up with spasms ripping through my leg. Sorry did not erase the humiliation that lived behind my eyelids. Sorry did not undo a felony. Still, something in me softened not toward Grace, but toward the possibility that consequences could change a person. The prosecutor's office kept me updated on the case. Court dates shifted and rescheduled, paperwork moved, judges reviewed motions. But through it all, the charge remained intact. Aggravated assault on a disabled person. A felony. One night, 6 months after the reunion, I wheeled myself to the bathroom and caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. I looked older, sharper, worn down, yet unbroken. That was the first night I told myself out loud, "You survived this." But just surviving did not mean it was over. The criminal case moved forward at its own pace, governed by the slow machinery of the legal system, but the civil lawsuit was something entirely different. It was personal. It was direct. It was the part where I finally stepped out of the role of patient and victim and into the role of someone who would no longer accept being trampled. The first meeting with attorney Karen Holt took place in her downtown office, a tall building of glass and stone that overlooked the river. Getting there required effort. My mother drove me. Dr. Brooks insisted on coming as well, both for medical clarity and moral support. The elevator ride up to the 22nd floor made my heart hammer in my chest. I had never sued anyone in my life. I had saved people, treated people, comforted them, but I had never fought them legally, especially not someone who shared my childhood bedroom. Karen Holt opened the door to her office the moment we stepped into the hallway. She was sharp, composed, confident. Her handshake was firm. Her eyes missed nothing. "Amanda, thank you for coming in. Let us get started." She ushered us into a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a long wooden table where thick folders were neatly arranged. She sat across from me and folded her hands. I have reviewed the police report, the medical documentation, and the video footage provided by Dr. Brooks. What happened to you is not only criminal, it is civilly actionable on multiple levels. My palms were sweating. What does that mean exactly? It means you have grounds to sue your sister for damages related to battery emotional distress and long-term medical consequences. And depending on how involved other family members were, there may be separate claims. I swallowed. Civil lawsuits always sounded like something wealthy people pursued, not something ordinary people like me. Karen slid a folder toward me. Your medical bills from the injury alone exceed $24,000. That does not include physical therapy, follow-ups, imaging medications, or the cost of the orthotic bracing you will need for the next year. I looked at the numbers and felt my stomach twist. I had known it was bad, but I had never seen it laid out like this. Karen continued, You also experienced public humiliation, targeted harassment, and what the law recognizes as intentional infliction of emotional distress. That is not a minor claim. Dr. Brooks spoke up. She has suffered significant psychological trauma since the incident. Nightmares, flashbacks, panic responses to loud voices. The therapist she is seeing can testify to ongoing PTSD symptoms. Karen nodded. Exactly, and civil courts take that very seriously. She leaned forward slightly. Amanda, the civil lawsuit is not about revenge. It is about accountability. It is about establishing that what happened to you caused real, measurable harm. I sat back, absorbing her words. Do you think we will win? Karen did not hesitate. We will settle. They will not take this to trial. The evidence is overwhelming. The only question is how much they will end up paying. My heart lurched. The idea of Grace having to pay anything at all felt both just and unbearably heavy. She was already living out of her car. Karen must have sensed the conflict in my expression because she softened her tone. Settlements can be structured. Payment plans, wage garnishment, even deferred schedules. You do not have to ruin her life to pursue justice. It was the first time a lawyer had ever sounded compassionate to me. I nodded slowly. Okay, let us do it. Karen smiled with quiet approval. Good. Then step 1 is sending the notice of intent to sue. After that, we begin calculating damages. She opened another folder. The list inside was exhaustive. Medical expenses, therapy costs, mobility equipment, pain and suffering, emotional trauma, and long-term physical limitations all had their own sections. It was surreal seeing my suffering quantified on paper. Karen looked at me firmly. Amanda, this is what accountability looks like. Grace's choices caused you harm. The law requires her to face that. The letter went out the next morning. Grace received it 2 days later. My phone rang that evening, my mother's voice trembling through the receiver. She got the letter, Amanda. She is hysterical. She says she cannot take any more. I closed my eyes, breathing through the tug in my chest. Tell her to speak to her attorney. This is not a conversation for us. My mother exhaled, shakily torn between her daughters, between guilt and loyalty and grief. The next week was a blur of calls between Karen and Grace's newly hired lawyer, a man who seemed more concerned with saving Grace's reputation than addressing her actions. He called Karen repeatedly. My client wants to resolve this quietly. This has already cost her her job and her housing. Karen responded without flinching. Your client caused a disabled person physical harm and lasting trauma. This will not disappear just because she is uncomfortable. After 3 rounds of back and forth, the first settlement offer arrived. It was insultingly low. Karen rejected it within minutes. The second offer was higher, but still insufficient given the scope of my injuries. The third offer finally acknowledged the full extent of my medical costs and long-term treatment, but Karen shook her head as she slid the document across the table to me. They are not taking responsibility for the emotional or psychological harm. That is unacceptable. I stared at the paper, my chest tight. I knew Grace was drowning. I knew she was suffering. But so was I. And her suffering was a consequence of her choices. Mine was a consequence of her violence. Karen placed a pen beside the document. This is your fight, Amanda. I will back whatever decision you make. but you deserve a settlement that reflects the truth. This one does not. I heard my therapist's voice echo in my mind. Trauma ignored becomes trauma repeated. Trauma acknowledged becomes trauma healed. I pushed the document back toward Karen. Reject it. 2 weeks later, the letter from Grace's attorney arrived. They agreed to all terms, every single one. The settlement amount included all medical damages, continued therapy, durable equipment replacements, transportation modifications, pain and suffering, and future medical needs projected by Dr. Brooks. It exceeded 6 figures. My breath caught. It was real. It was final. Karen placed a hand over mine. Amanda, this is justice. Partial justice. Painful justice. But justice. As I signed the final document, my signature trembling slightly, I realized something profound. This lawsuit was not about punishing Grace. It was about reclaiming the part of myself I had lost the moment she pushed me to the concrete. The settlement had barely settled into my mind when the story burst into the public eye again, louder and wider than before, spreading through Missouri and then across the entire country like a slow-moving fire that no one could put out. It started with a local reporter from Channel 7 who had been covering disability rights cases for years. She called Karen's office first, asking for confirmation about the civil lawsuit tied to the widely circulated video of the reunion. Karen informed me before making any statement, her voice calm, but laced with the knowledge that once the story left our hands, we would have no control over where it went. Amanda, this will likely become news whether we comment or not. My choice was simple: stay silent and let strangers shape the narrative or step forward and tell the story myself. I chose silence at first. I had lived through enough exposure, enough unsolicited judgment, enough faces staring at me like I was a spectacle. But the reporter already had the video. The moment they broadcast the story, everything shifted. The headline appeared on the television in my living room the following evening. Woman in wheelchair pushed to the ground by sister at family reunion. Doctor records everything. The footage played in slow motion the moment Grace's hands connected with the wheelchair, the way my body pitched forward the thud when I hit the concrete. The reporter's voice narrated calmly explaining the felony charge and the civil settlement. None of the details were exaggerated. They did not need to be. Reality was bad enough. Within 24 hours, the clip spread online again, hitting 2 million views. The comments section filled with outrage, disbelief, and a kind of protective fury that I had never felt from so many strangers before. As it circulated, the story transformed into something larger than my family's dysfunction. It became a symbol of how disabled people were treated, ignored, dismissed, and shamed. A woman wrote, "My son uses a wheelchair. If anyone ever did this to him, I would want the whole world to know." Another comment read, "This family should be ashamed. Disabled people are not props for your cruel entertainment." My phone buzzed constantly. Messages poured in from people across the country. Disabled adults, parents of disabled children, healthcare workers, veterans, teachers, people who had never met me but recognized the pain in that video because they had lived their own versions of it. My therapist warned me gently to limit how much I watched. Too much exposure can re-traumatize you. But some part of me needed to see the reactions, needed to see the world doing what my own family had failed to do, stand up for me. The exposure hit Grace harder than anyone. Though the video blurred most faces, the prosecutor's office had released her name publicly because of the felony charge. She became a recognizable figure almost overnight. People whispered when she walked into gas stations. Someone recorded her coming out of a grocery store and posted it with the caption, "This is the woman who pushed her disabled sister to the ground." Her former co-workers shared stories online about how she had mocked elderly patients. Whether those stories were fully true or embellished by the internet, no one knew, but they only fueled the storm. She tried creating a statement on her social media page saying the incident had been blown out of proportion. The comments were brutal. People asked how she could live with herself, how she could attack her own flesh and blood, how she could claim misunderstanding when the footage showed everything clearly. She deleted her accounts within 3 days. But the internet never deletes anything. Meanwhile, the rest of my extended family reacted with their own kind of panic. Some called my mother insisting they had no idea the video had been recorded. Some left voicemails for me filled with trembling excuses about how they had been scared or confused or thought it was a joke. None of them apologized. They only tried to protect themselves. A few attempted to claim they had actually tried to intervene, even though the footage proved otherwise. Karen told me to ignore them. Public exposure brings desperation. They will rewrite the truth to save their image. Let them. The facts are on your side. The news stations picked up the story one after another. A national morning show requested an interview. I declined. I was not ready to sit beneath the bright studio lights and relive the worst moment of my life in front of millions. I was not ready to answer questions from hosts who would tilt their heads sympathetically while nudging me to cry for dramatic effect. I wanted peace, not spectacle. But peace did not come easily. People recognized me at the grocery store offering hugs or words of encouragement. A high school teacher I barely remembered sent me flowers. A group of disability advocates reached out to invite me to speak at a conference. Through it all, I floated between gratitude and exhaustion, overwhelmed by attention I had never asked for. One evening, while scrolling through messages, I found one that stopped me cold. It was from a woman in another state whose daughter had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. She wrote, "Thank you for sharing your story. My family accused my daughter of exaggerating her pain for attention. Your story helped me show them that invisible disabilities are real. You helped us more than you know." I cried for nearly half an hour after reading it, shoulders shaking silently as the weight of everything settled deeper into my bones. This was why the story mattered. This was why exposure, painful as it was, had become something larger than humiliation. It had become validation not just for me, but for people whose suffering lived in the shadows. Weeks passed, then months. News coverage slowed. The world moved on to the next headline. But the story never disappeared completely. Every few days, someone new would message me saying they had just seen the video. Every few days, someone else would tell me what it meant to them. Grace's name remained tied to the incident in every search result, every article, every local news archive. Consequences carved themselves into her life like deep grooves, and for once, consequences were exactly where they belonged. Grace's fall was not a single moment, but a long, slow descent, the kind of collapse that happens when every support beam in a person's life gives way one after another. For months, I only heard about it through my mother, who carried updates with the same haunted tone she used when delivering news about distant relatives who were dying. But the truth was that Grace's unraveling had begun the second she pushed me, and the world finally saw her for who she had chosen to be in that moment. After her eviction, she spent several nights in her car parked behind an old grocery store where no one bothered to call the police on her. The first week she tried to shower at a gym using a guest pass someone had given her months before. By the second week, the gym revoked the pass after learning about the felony charge. Word traveled fast in small towns. People liked to help the wounded, but they had little sympathy for the ones who caused the wounds. She drove to job interviews, clinging to the hope that someone would overlook the news coverage, but the video always surfaced. Even when her face was blurred in some versions, her name was not. Every employer ran background checks. Every employer found the felony charge. Every employer backed away. My mother told me that Grace broke down sobbing in a parking lot after one interview ended 2 minutes in. They told her they could not hire someone who had assaulted a disabled person. She had tried defending herself, insisting that it had been a mistake, that she had let anger cloud her judgment. They showed her the door. At some point, she stopped trying. She moved from her car to a shelter when the cold Midwest nights became dangerous. The staff there treated her kindly enough, but the other residents recognized her from the viral video. Some whispered about her. Others avoided her entirely. Shame brewed around her like a fog she could not escape. At the same time, my own life remained a careful, painful climb towards some semblance of recovery. Physical therapy left me sore and trembling most days. Nerve stimulation treatments were brutal, sending bursts of electricity along damaged pathways while I gripped the edges of the table and breathed through clenched teeth. I could not stand for long. I could not walk without support. I could not sleep through a night without jolting awake, heart-pounding, recalling the circle of faces shouting at me to stand. But while I was healing, Grace was breaking. The contrast haunted me. Friends who had supported her for years stopped returning her calls. Old coworkers blocked her number. Even our extended family, the ones who had chanted along with her, avoided her out of fear that being associated with her would tarnish them further. None of them reached out to me either, except when they wanted something from me, like forgiveness they had not earned. But they abandoned her the moment she became a liability. My mother did her best to support both her daughters, but the strain wore her down. I could hear it in her voice on the phone, in the long pauses in the way she said Grace's name, like it was breaking her open each time. She stopped coming by your apartment, Amanda. She said she could not face you. She said she did not deserve to. She is right, I answered quietly. Deserving or not, she is still my daughter. My mother's voice fractured the line, stretching thin with grief. The civil settlement was finalized during this time, and the first payment plan began. Karen had been right. The judge allowed structured payments so the amount would not crush Grace all at once. Still, it was more than she could afford without steady work. The court paperwork made it clear a portion of her future earnings would be garnished for years, maybe decades. She told my mother she felt like she was drowning. My mother's reply was simple. You threw yourself into the water. Amanda almost died. That was the closest thing my mother had ever said to choosing me over Grace. And even then, it sounded like a wound inside her. As winter approached, Grace's mental state declined. The shelter called my mother once after Grace missed curfew and returned shaking, claiming someone had recognized her. Whether the threat had been real or imagined, no one knew, but the staff urged her to seek counseling. She refused. Pride was the last thing she had left, and she clung to it like a shield made of paper. My therapist once said that some people need consequences to see themselves clearly. Grace was one of them. For months, she drifted suspended in the fallout of her own actions. And still, I felt no satisfaction. I did not rejoice in her suffering. I did not want revenge. What I wanted was acknowledgement of the pain she caused, an apology that meant something, a sign that she had changed. The turning point came unexpectedly. One night, my mother called me, her voice tight with something I could not place. Grace was taken to the hospital. She collapsed at the shelter. Dehydration, exhaustion, emotional stress. She asked for you. My stomach twisted into knots. I told her I was not coming. I told her I could not, because I did not know if seeing her like that would break me or heal me. But hearing that she had finally asked for me after months of silence, after months of hiding, after months of pretending she could survive the storm she created, made something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Just a tremor of possibility. Grace's fall was nearly complete. She had lost her stability, her reputation, her home, her job, her friends, and every illusion she had clung to about who she was. All that was left was the truth she had run from for 6 months, and she could not run anymore. Grace's redemption did not arrive wrapped in a revelation or a tearful confession or some dramatic moment of cinematic clarity. It came in the form of court-ordered community service, exactly 150 hours of volunteer work at a rehabilitation center, the same kind of place where I had spent countless hours trying to rebuild what my body had lost. The judge assigned the placement after reviewing the psychological evaluation. The recommendation was clear exposure to the daily reality of disability would confront her with the humanity she had ignored. My mother told me first, hesitantly, as if afraid the news might reopen wounds. Grace is starting her service next week at Rush Rehabilitation Center. I swallowed hard. That was where I had done my first 6 months of post-accident recovery, where I had cried into my therapy bands, where I had learned how to sit up again, how to transfer from bed to chair, how to take 2 steps without collapsing. She had chosen cruelty there. I had chosen survival there. And now our worlds would cross paths again, but not through me. Through others like me. The first week was brutal for her. I did not hear about it directly from her, but from my mother and from a social worker who reached out to me afterward with my permission. Grace walked in thinking she would sweep floors, file papers, or refill water pitchers. That was what she hoped for: unskilled work that required no emotional labor. Instead, the volunteer coordinator assigned her to assist with mobility sessions. Real patient work, real vulnerability, real pain. The first day, she helped support a man in his 50s who was learning to transfer from his wheelchair to a therapy bench. He had suffered a spinal cord injury from a construction accident when his arm gave out unexpectedly and he nearly fell. Grace panicked, rushing to steady him. He thanked her breathlessly and told her she saved him from re-injuring his shoulder. Grace cried in the break room after that, the coordinator said. Not out of pity for the man, but because it was the first time she had seen up close how fragile and courageous disabled bodies had to be. The second day, she spent an hour sitting beside a teenage girl with cerebral palsy who was practicing hand dexterity. The girl's fingers trembled constantly, her brow furrowed in concentration as she tried to pick up plastic rings. Grace asked her gently, "Does it hurt?" The girl shrugged. "Everything hurts, but I want to get better." Grace cried again. The third day, she worked with a young veteran who had lost partial function in his legs after an IED explosion. He recognized her from the viral video. "You are the sister," he said quietly. Grace froze, thinking he would yell or condemn or shame her, but instead he looked at her with a slow, tired empathy. "You are lucky you get to learn. Some people never learn until it is too late." She cried again. By the end of the first week, she had cried more at Rush than I had in 6 months of therapy. But this time, her tears did not come from humiliation or fear. They came from witnessing what she had refused to believe: the humanity of disabled people, their effort, their pain, their dignity. She returned again and again, 5 days a week. She showed up early, left late, asked questions, stayed after sessions to help clean equipment. And slowly, the staff softened toward her. Patients began greeting her with trust in their eyes. She started carrying a notebook, jotting down techniques, reminders, and reflections. Once, she wrote something the coordinator shared with me later. "I used to think disability was weakness. Today, I saw more strength in 1 hour than I have seen in my entire life." Over the next month, as she assisted patients who trembled and pushed and strained and wept their way through therapy, something inside her shifted. The arrogance, the defensiveness, the cruelty she wielded like armor. Those pieces broke off, falling away each time she steadied someone who nearly fell, each time she saw someone try again after collapsing. Each time she heard a patient whisper, "I am scared, but also I want to keep going." She learned to strap gait belts correctly. She learned how to spot someone learning to stand. She learned how to reassure someone who felt hopeless, and little by little, she learned how to care. Not performatively, not because she wanted praise, but because she finally saw the world beyond her own entitlement. One afternoon, she helped a woman with MS transfer from her wheelchair to a mat table. The woman winced, whispering, "My legs feel like fire today." Grace steadied her and said softly, "I believe you." Those 3 words broke me when the coordinator told me later. I believe you. Words she never gave me. Words she had withheld for years. Words I had begged for without speaking. And now she was giving them to strangers because she had learned what they meant. The turning point came near the end of her service. She assisted an older man, a stroke survivor, who was trying to take his first step in 8 months. His leg buckled. Grace caught him. He clutched her arm, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Thank you. Thank you for not letting go." And for the first time, Grace cried not out of guilt or shame, but out of genuine empathy. She realized she had spent years letting go of me emotionally, and here she was, holding strangers with more care than she had ever shown her own sister. That night, she wrote a letter, a long one. The coordinator handed it to me at my next session, saying gently, "She asked me to give this to you when you are ready." I took it home and left it unopened on my dining table for 3 days. When I finally read it, the pages were soaked in the weight of everything she had never said. "I did not just hurt your body, Amanda. I tried to erase your pain. I tried to rewrite your reality because it was easier than accepting it. I was wrong. I was cruel. I am learning. I will keep learning." For the first time since the reunion, her words did not make my chest tighten. They made something loosen instead. Not forgiveness, but space. space for the possibility that she was becoming someone worthy of redemption. The day Grace finally came to see me in person was one of those afternoons where the air felt heavy like it was holding its breath. I had just finished a nerve stimulation session, the kind that left my muscles fluttering and my skin buzzing when my building's intercom chimed. My mother's voice came through, first trembling slightly. "Amanda, she is here. She wants to talk to you. She says she will leave if you say no." I froze in my wheelchair, fingers hovering above the wheels. For 6 months, I had imagined this moment, rehearsing 100 different versions of what I would say. In most of those imagined scenes, Grace begged and I stayed cold. In others, I screamed. In some, I could not speak at all. But now, in the real version of the moment, all I felt was a slow, deep ache in my chest. "Tell her she can come up." My mother did not respond with words, only a brief exhale of relief. A few minutes later, there was a knock on my apartment door. I wheeled myself toward it, each turn of the wheel stirring memories I did not want but could not avoid, the chanting, the fall, the concrete, the laughter. My hand hesitated on the door handle before I pulled it open. Grace stood in the hallway, clutching a thick folder in her hands. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, she had not lost much weight, but spiritually, internally, as if the arrogance she used to wear like a coat had been stripped from her. Her hair was pulled back awkwardly, and there were dark circles under her eyes. For the first time since the reunion, she looked like someone who understood suffering. "Amanda." Her voice cracked. I stepped back, giving her room to enter. She walked slowly, almost as if she was afraid of taking up too much space. She sat on the edge of my sofa, shoulders, bowed folder resting on her lap like it weighed 100 pounds. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence pressed between us, thick with everything we had not said. Grace was the first to break. "I do not deserve the chance to sit here. I know that, and I am not asking you to forgive me. I am asking you to let me speak." I nodded once, cautious but open. "Go ahead." She opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were papers. Letters, mostly some handwritten, some typed, each bearing a name I did not recognize. "These are from people at the rehab center. Patients. People I have been working with. People who let me help them. People who let me learn from them." She handed me the first letter. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "Grace has been patient and gentle with me. When I was terrified of falling, she held my gait belt and told me I was safe. I owe her my first steps." My throat tightened as I read it, but Grace continued speaking before I could respond. "Something broke in me that day, Amanda. When I pushed you, I thought I was proving something, exposing something, making you stand because I could not accept the truth of your pain. I told myself lies. I convinced myself that you were exaggerating, that you wanted attention, that you were using the wheelchair to escape responsibility. And when you fell," she paused, swallowing hard. "When you hit the ground and I heard everyone laugh, something inside me twisted, but I ignored it. I doubled down. I became cruel because cruelty was easier than admitting I was wrong." My chest felt tight. Grace lifted her gaze to mine. "When the court sent me to do community service, I thought it was punishment. But it was the first time in my life that I truly saw what you have been living with. Every person I helped reminded me of you. The pain, the effort, the fear, the courage. I thought about how you must have felt when your leg gave out, when you collapsed, when you cried, when you could not control the spasms. I thought about all the times I rolled my eyes or mocked you behind your back. I thought about your face the moment I shoved you, and every night I cried because I realized how monstrous I had been." She slid another paper toward me. This one was her handwriting. A letter addressed to me. "I wrote this weeks ago, but I could not bring myself to ask you to read it." She took a shaky breath. "Amanda, I am sorry. I am sorry I pushed you. I am sorry I led that chant. I am sorry I called you a liar. I am sorry I made you feel small. I am sorry I chose everyone else's approval over your safety. I am sorry I doubted you. I am sorry I ignored your pain. I am sorry I treated you like you were disposable. I am sorry I turned your recovery into my resentment. I am sorry I abandoned you when you needed a sister." Tears filled her eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks. "I am not asking you to erase anything I did. I am not asking you to forget. I am only asking you for humanity." I sat there for a long moment, absorbing every word. Then I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the sister who had humiliated me, but the woman shattered by the consequences of her choices. "Grace," I said quietly, "I forgive your ignorance, but I do not forgive your cruelty." Her lips parted and grief washed across her face, but before she could speak, I continued. "That does not mean forgiveness is impossible. It means you have more work to do, and I need time." She nodded slowly, tears still falling. "That is fair." It was the same sentence I had once used on her. The symmetry of it made my chest ache. I took a breath. "But I see you trying. I see the work you are doing. And that matters." Grace's shoulders shook as she cried harder, but something like relief flickered across her expression. Fragile, tentative, real. I gestured to the folder. "Tell me about the people you helped." For the next 2 hours we talked. Really talked. About the rehab center. About the patients. About what she had learned. About who she was trying to become. When she finally stood to leave, she paused at the door. "I will earn your forgiveness, even if it takes my whole life." I met her eyes. "Do not earn it for me. Earn it because it makes you better." She nodded. "That I can do." 2 years after the reunion, I found myself rolling across the polished floors of the Springfield Convention Center, the wheels of my chair gliding smoothly beneath me as if carrying me toward a version of myself I had not dared to imagine. I had been invited to speak at a statewide disability rights conference, not because I was an expert, not because I had written papers or led organizations, but because people wanted to hear the story of someone who had survived both the violence of an injury and the violence of disbelief. I almost said no. Public attention still made my stomach twist. But then I remembered the message from the mother whose daughter had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, the veteran who said my story helped him confront his family's denial, the teenager who told me she played my news clip for her relatives when they said she was exaggerating her scoliosis pain. So I said yes. And now I was here positioned behind the side curtain while a moderator introduced me. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the microphone clipped to my shirt. The room beyond the curtain buzzed with chatter, wheelchair motors humming, service dogs shifting canes, tapping rhythmically on the linoleum. A community built from resilience, from exhaustion, from determination, from grief, from strength, the world rarely acknowledged. Amanda Kerr, the moderator, announced a former ER nurse who became an advocate after surviving one of the most widely publicized disability discrimination incidents in the state. The applause rose like a wave. I was not prepared for how loud it sounded. When I rolled onto the stage, hundreds of faces turned toward me. Some were tearful. Some were curious. Some were simply relieved to see someone like them sitting at a podium where people like us were rarely invited. I began speaking, my voice steadier than I expected. I told them about the accident that put me in the wheelchair. I told them about the therapy, the struggle, the pain. But mostly, I told them about the reunion, what it felt like to fall, what it felt like to hear laughter when your body is screaming, what it felt like when the people who should have believed you chose to believe anything else instead. The room stayed silent, not with disbelief, but with recognition. When I played a 30-second clip of the video, the moment the chanting started, the tension in the room thickened. People flinched. Some held hands. Some closed their eyes. They knew that chant in their own ways. When I finished the story, I looked out at them and said, "The worst part was not hitting the ground. The worst part was thinking my pain did not matter, that I did not matter. You matter, every one of you. Your pain is real, your fight is real, and your value does not depend on whether others believe you." The room erupted into applause, long sustained, emotional. I had spoken for only 20 minutes, but something inside me felt different when I left the stage, lighter, as if I had finally returned a piece of myself that had been stolen the day of the reunion. After the session, a young woman approached me in a motorized wheelchair. She was probably in her late 20s, her hands curled slightly from muscle weakness. "Multiple sclerosis," she said softly. "My family says it is in my head. They think I am being dramatic. They tell me I could walk if I tried harder." Her voice broke. "I showed them your video. They still do not believe me." My heart clenched. "Do you have medical documentation? 3 neurologists, brain scans, and they still—" She shook her head helplessly. "Just tell me what to do." I leaned forward and spoke quietly the same words Dr. Brooks had once given me. "Document everything, and protect yourself. You cannot control whether they choose ignorance, but you can control how much access their ignorance has to your life." Tears spilled down her cheeks. I handed her a tissue. "Your pain is not up for a vote," I said gently. She nodded and hugged me awkwardly but warmly. "Thank you. For fighting back, for showing us we are allowed to." One by one, others approached me with stories, different conditions, different battles, but the same longing to be believed. By the time I left the convention center, the sun had dipped low, glowing orange across the parking lot. My mother waited by the car, waving me over with a bright, proud smile I had not seen from her in years. But someone else was there too, standing a few steps behind her. Grace. She looked different than she had 6 months ago. Still softer, still humbled, but stronger now too. Not the old kind of strength that came from denial or arrogance. A quieter strength built from choosing to show up every day at the rehab center, even after her court-mandated hours had ended. She had continued volunteering. The patients had asked for her, and she stayed. She stepped forward hesitantly. "I watched your speech," she said softly. "I wanted to sit in the back, but the room was full. You were incredible." Her voice wavered, and she looked at me with a mixture of awe and sorrow. "I still have a long way to go. I know that, but I want you to know I am trying. Every day I am trying." I nodded slowly. "I know." She swallowed. Do you think someday you could forgive me?" I thought about the reunion, the fall, the chanting, the humiliation, the tears, the therapy, the settlement, the apology, the work she had done, the work she still had to do. And then I thought about something Dr. Brooks once told me. Healing is not a finish line, it is a direction. I met her eyes. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but we are walking or wheeling in the right direction. Grace exhaled shakily. "That is enough. For now, that is enough." As the sun dipped behind the trees and the world softened into evening, I pushed my wheelchair toward the car. The air smelled warm, clean, hopeful. For the first time in 2 years, I felt something gentle settle inside me. Closure. Not because the past had been erased, but because I was no longer trapped in it. I was moving forward, into the light, into whatever came next.